everyone, I'm Julie Cefalu, and for today's tip, we're going back to basics with rotary cutting. So we're going to start with the fabric, and when I go to cut something, the very first thing that I do is I press it really well. I like to use starch when I press my fabrics. I use Best Press. That's my favorite, but any starch you have will do. I feel like pressing it with starch just gives you a little bit more control. The fabric behaves better, so it's a great idea if you haven't tried it. Starch your fabrics when you press them. Then I'm going to fold my fabric in half, and I want to match the selvage edges when I do that. So I hold it up and I get those selvages so that they're lined up on top, and I want it to hang down nice and straight and flat so it's not wobbly. Okay, now that I've got my fabric folded in half and the selvages are lined up, I'm going to place the fabric on my cutting mat, and I have the fold closest to me. Now when I cut my fabric, I don't use the lines of the mat. The only thing I'm concerned about is my fabric and the ruler. Those two things have a great relationship together, and it's really important. But to me, it takes time to line everything up with the lines on the mat, and it's not as accurate, and it's certainly not that efficient. So let me just show you how my procedure goes. The first thing I'm going to do is make a cleanup cut on the right-hand side for me, since I'm right-handed of the fabric. And the ruler, I take one of the lines of the ruler that are going horizontally, and I place it right on the fold of my fabric. And then I want to show you how I hold the ruler. So my hand that's holding the ruler is going to be up like this, so I'm using my fingertips, and my pinky is off the edge of the ruler, and that's going to even help a little bit more with controlling that ruler and keeping it from sliding as you're cutting. And then the rotary cutter, I'm holding it at about a 45-degree angle, and it's a really good habit to always lock that rotary cutter when you're not using it. Once you pick it up, then you're okay to expose that blade. And I've got a little bit of ruler hanging off the bottom edge of my fabric. That's where I'm going to start. I put my rotary cutter right against that edge, and then I'm rolling up and onto the fabric. And once that rotary cutter gets beyond the hand that's holding the ruler, I'm going to stop, and I'm not going to lift that rotary cutter. I'm going to keep it in place, and I'm going to inch my hand up. And I've always got a hand that's right across from the rotary cutter, all the way up and off the edge. Before I move that ruler, I'm going to make sure that I got all of those edges cut, so we can get rid of that. So that's my very first cleanup cut. Now I'm going to rotate that fabric around like this. And now I'm going to cut some strips out of this fabric, and today I'm going to cut some 3-inch wide strips. So I'm going to find the 3-inch line of my ruler. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and I'm going to put that 3-inch line on my cut edge. So the reason it's important to have that first cleanup cut is so that when you open up your fabric, you've got a straight line. You don't want any bends in the elbow, so they say. Now I've got everything lined up here on the 3-inch line. It doesn't matter if my fabric is lined up with the lines on the mat. It's just the ruler and the fabric. And now I can cut my 3-inch strip. Now as I work my way down the width of my fabric, I like to check. So after a couple of strips, I'll check to make sure that I still have a 90-degree angle right here at the fold and the last cut. And to check it, you can just bring your ruler back here and put one of the lines on the ruler on the fold and see what's happening along this edge. Another tip I have about cutting, let's say I need to cut 2 more 3-inch wide strips. I'm going to cut at 6 inches because 2 3-inch wide strips are 6 inches total. So I'm going to put the 6-inch line of my ruler on my cut edge. And I can see right here that the line here on the ruler is following the fold. I'm going to cut here at 6 inches. And now I'm going to just back my ruler up to 3 inches, like this. It's a little tiny trick, but it's just a little more efficient that way. Cut my 3-inch strip, and now I've got 2 3-inch strips cut. And now I want to show you how I cut a strip set. So let's get rid of this for now. So I have a very short strip set here, and when I'm cutting my strip sets into segments, the first thing, again, I need to make a cleanup cut on one of these ends. So I take my ruler, and for my cleanup cut, I want to put the line of my ruler on the seam of my strip set. That's a little bit more accurate that way and consistent. So my line goes on the seam, and it should be tracking here and here on the raw edges, but this is really important, that line there, the seam line. And I'm going to make my cleanup cut right here. Get rid of that. Now I'm going to turn my strip set around. So my clean edge is over here, and I want to cut this into 3-inch wide segments. So the 3-inch line of the ruler goes on my cut edge. Again, this line should be tracking that seam right there. And I can cut one, and we'll cut one more. And I'm done. So remember, always lock that blade before you put it down, and you don't need to worry about using the lines on your mat. One thing I did want to mention is sometimes you've got to cut a strip that's wider than your ruler. So this ruler is 6.5 inches wide. Well, let's say I need to cut something that's 7 inches wide. You can take 2 rulers to do that. You could also use the lines on your mat. Sometimes I do, but I want to show you how I would do that with 2 rulers. So here is my fabric, and we're assuming that this edge is nice and perpendicular here. So since I've got 6.5 inches here, I want to cut a 7-inch wide strip. I'm going to use another ruler, and I'm going to put the 1/2-inch line of this ruler. Since I've got 6.5, I need just another 1/2 inch to make it to 7. I'll put the 1/2-inch line of this ruler on my cut edge. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so I'm not getting distracted by these lines. And then I'm going to butt this ruler right up next to it. And again, my horizontal line of the ruler should be on my fold still. And now I'm going to cut a 7-inch wide strip just using those 2 rulers. All right, ta-da! There you go. So there's your rotary cutting tip for today.